Yesterday, I was tagged in a video making the case that people who wear uniforms will remember their oath to the Constitution and will not follow wrongful orders and bring force against the people of our nation. And I have to respectfully disagree. It's a nice dream, but it's just a dream. Those who wear uniforms will always stand with the establishment powers that they represent and never with the common people. Our history makes this very, very clear. I challenge anyone to find me a meaningful example to the contrary in all of U.S. history. And while you're racking your brains thinking for an example, I'll give you some examples that support my position as to why it's only a wishful thinking dream. Shays Rebellion, 1787. 1,200 individuals revolting against the oppressive tax code and burdensome regulations being imposed upon them by the newly formed United States government. Rebellion squashed by military soldiers in uniform. Whiskey Rebellion, 1791. American people suffering under the extreme economic depression that had been brought about by the revolution. People began trading whiskey as a form of currency because they literally had no cash. But in doing so, they were not paying the federal government their taxes. None other than George Washington himself rode out before an army of 30,000 army soldiers to crush these rebellious peasants who refused to pay their taxes. Now, fortunately, hearing of Washington's approach and the slaughter that Washington had planned for them, these rebellious people who weren't paying their whiskey tax ran and hid in the hills, and the massacre that Washington had intended never occurred. Fry's Rebellion, 1799. Yet again, another tax revolt. This time in Pennsylvania, farmers again squashed by men in uniform. You know, for a nation that was founded in part on rebellion against oppressive tax laws and burdensome regulations, the United States was really fast in passing taxes and regulations that were even more oppressive than anything Britain had ever done. But I guess that's another story. Anyway, Muskogee Uprising, 1800. Native Americans attempting to band together as they were being driven out of their homes and lands to make way for white settlers. Again, crushed by U.S. Armed Forces. German Coast Uprising, 1811. A slave rebellion. Military units hunted down, captured, and executed the rebellious slaves. Nate Turner, Slave Rebellion, 1831. Rebellious slaves slaughtered by police and militia. Dorr Rebellion, 1841. The people of Rhode Island demanded expanded voter rights to include more of the male population. They weren't even asking for rights for women or anything like that. They just wanted a larger amount of the men to be able to vote. Rebellious individuals arrested by the men in uniform, and they were prosecuted. I think they all lived. Anyway, Cherokee Nation slave revolt, 1842. Rebellious slaves captured and executed by police. Anti-rent war, 1845. Several years of protests against abusive landlord practices in New York resulted in dozens, maybe even hundreds of protesters being beaten by police. Protest leaders were arrested and imprisoned. John Brown, 1859 slave revolt. Slaves killed and captured, led by none other than Robert E. Lee. New York City draft law, 1863. New laws that allowed greater economic opportunity for black business owners. White citizens began attacking the black people to suppress this unwanted competition. They had the market entirely to themselves, and they were not happy that these new laws were allowing people of color to open businesses in competition with them. U.S. soldiers, state militia, and police squashed the rebellion. But interestingly enough, even though it was the white people who were attacking the black people, they never found any wrongdoing on those parts. But they did find members of the black community who were the victims to be guilty of criminal behavior. I wonder how that possibly could have been. Anyway, just one more event of our great people in uniform. Moving on. Great railroad strike of 1877. Railroad workers went on strike against low wages and abusive work conditions. Police and National Guard came in and squashed that rebellion. As many as 100 strikers were killed by police and National Guard just for refusing to cooperate and go to work under these horrendous and even deadly work conditions. That's what happens when you stand up against the government. The people in uniform will come and force you to obey the people in uniform. They don't go, "We'll stand with the people." And still more examples. Greenwood insurrection, 1892. Residents having their lands taken from them by the railroad giants rebelled against these property seizures. People were having their homes taken, destroyed, and they were taking prime real estate from average everyday citizens in the name of the railroad. And those rebellious citizens were again arrested, imprisoned, beaten by the people in uniform. What is it? The Yaqui Uprising, 1896. This came as a response to abuses being done to the Native American people, American militia, Mexican infantry, and local police crushed the rebellion. Coal Creek War, 1890. Workers' uprising strike against abusive labor practices by the coal industry giants at the time, who were arguably the most powerful industry of the day. They were one of three. We had coal, steel, and the railroad industries. They were kind of the labor giants of the day, and all of them were actively using police, National Guard, military to crush the peasants into doing whatever it is they wished for them to do, and the people had no rights to stand against them. The people in uniform didn't stand with the people. They stood with the establishment powers. Anyway, these coal miners were crushed by men in uniform. Dozens killed, at least 500 arrested and prosecuted. Coalfield Wars that went on from 1890 through 1930. Dozens of labor strikes against these abusive practices. Men in uniform were used to go in and crush these rebellion time after time. Never once did the people in uniform stand in solidarity with the people demanding even modest labor rights. They weren't asking for much. They were asking not to have to be killed or their jobs to receive more than slave wages. Did the people in uniform stand with them? No. Hell no. They stood with the establishment powers. Blair Mountain War, 1921, the largest of all the coal miner wars. Police, military, National Guard, and private security companies used to crush coal miner rebellions. As many as 100 coal miners were killed, and they used such tactics as machine guns mounted from aircraft to fire upon these rebellious Americans who were demanding labor rights. Tulsa Race Massacre, 1921. A mob of angry white people attacked the black people, destroying their homes and businesses, burning and destroying 35 square blocks of what was considered the wealthiest black community in all of the United States in that day, the region that was known as Black Wall Street. This riot resulted in leaving at least 10,000 black people homeless, and the deaths of several hundred black people, at least 300. And while the white people had instigated this, started the entire thing, they set fire to the homes and businesses, burning 35 square blocks. When the event happened, the hospitals of the black peoples had all been burned and destroyed during the riot, and so the white hospitals in the outskirt areas, they were segregated, and so black people who were injured were denied treatment at these segregated hospitals. The whites who started it, they could get treatment. And there were investigations for years to come who was responsible. And why did law enforcement do nothing? They stood by and watched, and they never intervened. And it all resulted in nothing but years of cover-ups. Not one single white person was ever charged in a crime out of the event. Not one. But there were, however, many black people charged with crimes against the white people because they were trying to defend themselves, but that was criminal behavior. Bonus Army, 1932, getting more modern day here. Tens of thousands of World War I veterans gathered in Washington, D.C. to demand their bonus pay that they had been promised for having fought for their country in World War I. U.S. military forces, directed by President Hoover under the command of Douglas MacArthur, Dwight D. Eisenhower, ordered George Patton to launch a full-scale military assault on these protesters, and they slaughtered hundreds of them. Greensboro Uprising, 1969, civil rights demonstration. Army National Guard, local police killed 2, wounded 18, hundreds more arrested. Civil rights uprisings from 1960s through 1970s, as many as 20,000 demonstrators arrested by men in uniform, countless beaten. Kent State University, 1970, anti-Vietnam protest. National Guardsmen fired 67 rounds in 13 seconds on unarmed students, killing 4, injuring 9. Student-led anti-apartheid demonstrations, 1970s, 1980s, would result in hundreds of people arrested by men in uniform, dozens, maybe even hundreds being beaten. Present-day demonstrations for the rights of people in Gaza. People are being arrested, some are being deported by men in uniform. Where are these examples of the people in uniform remembering their duty first to the people? Has it ever occurred in our history? This is a pretty long list, and I've left a lot out of it. These are just some of the major events. And I only touched on the times that Native Americans attempted to defend themselves. Never once did the people in uniform ever stand in solidarity with them. Did you come up with any examples for the times that the people in uniform stood up on the behalf of people who were struggling against the oppression brought about in this nation? Maybe you thought about, there were a couple of instances where police made gestures of solidarity during the demonstrations of the George Floyd riots. That's something, but it sure isn't much. Not when you put up against this wave of evidence to the contrary. From the very beginning of this nation, all the way to present day, and even before the United States was a nation, the people in uniform have not once stood in solidarity with the people of the nation when they were demanding their rights. Only years and years later would the rights of these people be recognized by the establishment And the people in uniform, oh yeah, we stand with the people. No, not once in history. You think it's going to happen today or tomorrow? It doesn't happen. It has never happened in global history that I'm aware of. Maybe somewhere in globe. That maybe that statement is reaching, but definitely not in American history. Instead, they say, I'm just doing my job. I don't make the laws. I just enforce them. Thousands of years of atrocity and human suffering brought about by people who say, I'm just doing my job. They never refuse to take those orders. In the video I was tagged in, people said, well, they have the legal right to refuse an illegal order. But the establishment determines what a legal order is. It is not within your purview to question whether or not an order is legal. And they never do. Slavery, genocide, ethnic cleansing, all of this has been done under the banner of law. All of it legal. If we were still operating under the laws of slavery, and you were ordered to crush a slave rebellion, you could not deny that order as wrongful because it was an illegal order. It was a legal order. Oppression of the people is legal. I'm just following the orders of the king. I don't make his laws. I just work for the king. I'm keeping the peace. Just upholding the status quo. Now, these are not valid excuses, but it's still the reality that we have lived under and we will continue to live under. Police and politicians are nothing but noisy people with bad ideas until someone with a gun or with a sword takes those ideas to the streets and makes them a reality to the common people. We could end this cycle. We could end it today. We come from a past where we're told that ignorance of the law is no excuse. It's time we learn a new lesson, that because it's a law is no excuse. I'm just following orders is not an excuse. I'm just doing my job is not an excuse. I'm just enforcing the law is not an excuse. And while none of these things are rightful excuses, to believe that there is even a scrap of possibility that the people in uniform would defy their orders and stand with the American people is ignorance of the highest level. It's a pipe dream. So I sympathize with the dream, but it is only a dream. And to make people believe it is more than a dream or give them hope is a mistake. I can't be part of that, even though it's a nice dream, but it's only a dream.